Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent computer role-playing game. And this week, well, I'll go ahead and save some of you some time. I'm covering a game that is not a RPG. I mean, it uses the RPG Maker engine, you play a role, it has a story, and a rather interesting one at that, but it has none of the usual stat advancement, combat, or anything you'd expect from most classic RPGs. So it's really more an adventure game with multiple endings. But after playing through it a few times, I decided to cover it anyway just because. So for those of you who are left watching, this week I'm covering The Deed from Pilgrim Adventures and Grab the Games, published by Grab the Games and Whisper Games. It was released on Steam back on November 23rd, 2015, so some years ago. It has, however, since spawned 2 sequels in the same series, so it is worth taking a look at where it started. The Deed, as I mentioned, is an RPG Maker engine, and is rather short all in all. It centers around a sort of reverse murder mystery where you plot and execute a murder and try to get away with it. It all takes place in one house. There are multiple characters with which to interact, and you can attempt to frame any of them. In terms of plot, you play as one Aaron Bruce, heir of Dunshill House. It's 1945, and you're returning to your estranged family at their estate on the occasion of your father's 50th birthday. You've recently discovered that your abusive father intends to leave the estate to your mentally unstable sister, and you have settled on the idea of killing her to reclaim your birthright. So yeah, the main character is not a good person, nor is almost every other person in the household. The story itself just revolves around the 6 characters: Aaron Bruce, his father, his mother, his sister, the maid, and the butler. It takes place in a few stages. There's an initial setup and exploration, then there's a dinner, then there's the deed itself, and then finally the interview. During each stage, you interact with the other characters, with your actions and conversations having a strong bearing on the outcome. During the setup phase, you can collect 2 items, a bit of evidence and a weapon. During the deed, you then place the evidence in one room and then use the weapon to do your sister in. During the dinner and the interview, it is just a conversation, although your reactions during each will guide suspicion one way or another. During play in general, you can move around in 4 directions, go from room to room, investigate certain items by pressing the interaction key, and speak with people by pressing the same key. You can access your inventory at any time and save the game at any time. Your inventory can only carry 2 things, because as soon as you pick up the second thing, dinner is served, and the phase shifts to the dinner phase. There is nothing to pick up during the deed phase. Interestingly enough, you can actually pick up 2 weapons or 2 pieces of evidence, which can mess you up, but does affect the end dialogues. The dialogue system is actually the best part of the game. Each character offers multiple routes through their dialogue, and although you can't really repeat dialogues during each phrase, the progress you make through each conversation has a drastic effect on the story as a whole, especially at the end. And the interview phase at the end is where it all comes together. During this phase, you are drawn into an interview with a police detective. At this point, everything that you've done, every person you've talked to, the various evidence and such is brought up and gone over piece by piece. How truthfully you answer his questions and how well they piece together will determine the ending that you've selected. The game itself is rather short. It took me a bit under an hour to play through it on average, and I did a few playthroughs, although if you know what you're doing, you can blow through it in just a few minutes. The real playthrough value is how to get each ending. And there are different endings depending on who gets blamed for the murder, whether you get away with it, and whether or not you actually inherit the estate. Graphically, it's not a classic cartoonish RPG Maker game, but uses customized tiles and models, making for a very different feel. I think it's well enough put together in that regard, with the art style being consistent throughout. Musically, it has a few different tracks throughout the game that seem well suited for where they appear, whether it be the title screen, a random phonograph in the corner, or more. For such simplistic graphics and interface, it is rather atmospheric in terms of gameplay, and captures the feel of really being in a murder mystery rather well. The writing is very solid for what it is too, with the characters well realized, and frankly most of them well deserving of whatever fate you choose for them. So is it worth it? I mean, it's not going to be a long-term RPG. It'll occupy an afternoon. I personally thought the story was great, and it makes me want to take a look at the other 2 entries in the series, The Deed Legacy and The Deed 2. If you can catch it on sale like I did and are in the type to enjoy the sorts of multiple ending adventures The Deed represents, all the better. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here. Yeah, I know this is a really brief review for a very brief game. I'll try to return for a proper classic-style RPG next time. As always, I'll put a link to where you can pick it up in the description below. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday The Deed. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.